Hey, welcome back. Today we're going to talk about lesson 4.2, day one. Does SAT prep improve scores? We're looking at the difference between an observational study and an experiment, what goes into each of those, how do we determine which one's which, and when might we use them. So as you answer these questions, hopefully you've already answered them, but if you're just answering them for the first time, we're going to be walking through these, and I'm going to be pointing out some things on the side as we go through to sort of teach you kind of what the pieces are that should go into this and the considerations that should go into it. So last year, EKHS, so high school students, the high school offered an after-school SAT prep class that students could volunteer to take. So a couple things come out right there. We need to consider, like we did in our previous lesson, when we're talking about the way that you ask questions or the circumstances surrounding it, the limiting factors. We have a couple limiting factors here, right? So it's an after-school SAT prep class, and they could volunteer to take it. So those are some interesting things that we need to take into account. 44 students took the course, then took the SAT. The average SAT score for this group was 1220. The average SAT score for all students who did not take the prep class was 1050. Okay, so is the situation described an observational study or an experiment? So this is an observational study. And you can imagine an observational study is when you observe something. But what's the difference between that and an experiment? Well, so the students were not forced to take the class. Okay, so that's huge. So in an experiment, you are imposing, they're called treatments on someone. So you're saying, you must do this and we're going to see the effects. So in this case, they said, hey, anybody want to take this class? So that kind of opens us up to a couple of different things that have happened, could happen. But as we look at this, the important note here is in an observational study, there is no treatment. Okay, so no treatment imposed. What does that mean? Well, the treatments are the things you're doing to people that you're measuring how they respond. Okay, so second thing, identify the explanatory variable and the response variable. So the explanatory, did they take the course or not? Right, so this is kind of binary, yes or no. The response is their score, their SAT score, right? That's what we're measuring. That's what we're looking at. Was it affected by this? So using to predict it and the outcome. So explanatory is what we're saying happened, and the outcome is the SAT score. Can you conclude that taking the prep course will cause the student's SAT score to increase or not? Why or why not? I think you have to say no here, right? How many factors could go into this, right? So the students who take this course, maybe they're highly motivated. Maybe they would have done better anyway. Maybe they are taking an extra class on their own as well. You don't know. So there's a lot of unknowns here. So no. And excuse me. No. So students who take the class may be highly motivated anyway. And study more. And the key word here is anyway, right? So this is not a treatment. We didn't prescribe it. We didn't make them take it. So we're saying there are a lot of factors that could lead to it. This could be one of them. Identify as many other possible variables that you can explain why the SAT scores are higher for those who took the prep course than for those who did not. So they may have more time to study because this prep class is after school. So maybe they're not in a sport that plays after school. Maybe they don't have a job that's after school. Maybe they aren't in drama after school. So after school activities were limited. Again, not to say that maybe they skipped rehearsal or practice or whatever their job to go to this, but there's a limiting factor here, right? The class was at a certain time. Secondly, they have a ride home, right? So they've got a ride home. They don't have to take the bus. They don't have to leave right after school. They can stay around. These are limiting factors. These are just factors that could explain why. Maybe they want to do. Why is this a limiting factor? Well, in an experiment, I'd force somebody to sit through the class, and it could be something where, you know, they are forced to sit through the class, and maybe their scores went up. There's no factor here for that. So if a student's already motivated to do well, this is just an opportunity for them. Pieces of the puzzle that cause confusion, that make it seem like, does this contribute to what I'm trying to measure or not, are called confounding variables. Okay, these are called confounding variables. Okay, so this is an experiment, or sorry, an observational study that's laced with a lot of confounding variables. Don't really know what we're trying to measure here. And so when you were designing experiments, we really need to make sure that we're taking into account the variables that try to limit the variables that are affecting what we're trying to do. That's why you often hear, when you're on the radio, you hear on the radio like, we're looking for males over the age of 24 who are, you know, have this certain disease or these characteristics. We're looking for females who, you know, whatever. So we're looking for a specific type of people. They're trying to limit the number of variables that are going to confound our results. Okay, so design an experiment that would allow us to determine if the SAT prep causes an increase in SAT scores. Be as thorough as possible. Okay, so your answers for this are going to vary, but you should say something like this: randomly choose. Right, so randomly choose, however you do that. Simple random sample, stratification, whatever. Let's say 100 juniors. They're at that age where they're going to start applying to colleges. You don't have that, well, is it a freshman? They don't really care. So you're picking all of the same age group. And you pick this 100 juniors to be a part of the experiment. And so what you might do is you need to, you're measuring the effect of the class. So you split them up into two groups of 50. Half take the class, and half do not. After the class is done, have all of them take the SAT. Okay? Find the average scores of each group. Okay, so a couple of things come out here. So you've got to have a control over how many people, right? So you have to say, I've got 100 of them, and some of them are taking it, some of them are not. So these 100 juniors are what we call the experimental units. right? These experimental units are who we're doing the experiment on. Half take the class. Half do not. These are the treatments. Treatments are the conditions that we are imposing to get the response, to measure the response. All right, so that's what we're doing. That's how we're looking at this from a standpoint of saying designing an experiment versus just observing what happened. Okay, so let's take some general notes here. Big ideas behind this. Let's talk about observational studies. As we saw up top, an observational study has no treatments, just observations. Okay, the second piece is this: experiments have treatments. And they allow for causation. So what we're doing is we're imposing some treatment. For example, the the SAT prep class. That's treatment that we're imposed, and we're trying to see if it causes the scores to go up. Okay. Couple of notes on the variables involved here. Explanatory variables. Okay, so we're not getting away from this. The explanatory variables are used to predict. Right, so they're used to predict or used to explain why something might have happened. If there's more than one, we call them factors. And factors have levels. What does this mean? So sometimes it's going to be straightforward. So you're going to say, this is why. So, you know, for the example of the SAT prep class. So the main explanatory variable for why the scores go up, if they go up, you'd say it was because they took this class. Okay. Well, there could be other factors that play in. And so we determine what was the main factor, right? So if you measured a couple of different things. If you measured, did they take the class? Did they eat right going up to like did they eat right in the week leading up to the test, or did they get enough sleep leading up to the test, or how much homework did they have? So you have these different factors that could that if you account for them, you call them factors, and you say these are the things that influenced our outcome. Well, the main influencer, the next main, so you kind of level them out and say these were the main causes. Okay. The response variable, those are the outcomes. Right, so in that case, it would be no matter what the factors are that were affecting SAT scores, the response variable is the outcome. Treatments. Treatments are what is done to the participants. So that's what you actually have them do. So did they take the class or not? The experimental units. Those are the subjects. What or who the treatment is imposed on. And confounding variables. Confounding variables were those variables that they're sort of in the background and they're influencing our outcomes, but we're not accounting for them. Okay, so there are variables that are not controlled. That affect the outcome. All right. All right, guys. So what I want you to do is take that information, look down at these, this next check your understanding section, check your understanding, and we're going to look over that next time and talk about how it all plays together as we talk about observational studies and experiments. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.